Okay, everyone. So this is the second video, and this is going to go over like the grading policy and some other administrative stuff for the course. And then I will go over the some other information, and then I'll go over the readings. Okay, so the grading policy. So then these are the things that I'm going to use to determine your final grade at the end of the semester. So your final grade will be determined by your performance on 6 assignments, attendance, and participation. As I mentioned before, the way that I'm going to evaluate this is just you signing onto the Canvas shell for this course, and at the very minimum, staying in the Canvas shell for 30 minutes. All right, but you're going to be in the doing, the module assignments is going to take you at least like 3 to 4 hours, more or less, to be able to finish it all. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, as I mentioned earlier, is the peer editing, or editing a peer's essay, and then writing a reflection paper on a peer's editing essay, as well as the weekly Canvas modules and the 7 to 10 page research proposal and presenting your research proposal. Oh, excuse me. So attendance is worth 300 points, right? And then editing a peer's essay by itself is 650 points, and writing the the reflection paper or the review essay is 450 points. And then the weekly Canvas modules, there's going to be 14. They're going to be worth 50 points each for a total of 700 points. And then the 7 to 10 page research proposal, that's worth 450 points. And then the final research proposal presentation is worth 450 points for a total of 3,000 points. All right. Yeah. So then again, this is how I'm going to determine your grade. And then here is like the general breakdown. So this is the raw score. This is just going straight points from everything from an A all the way down to an F. And then I also have done the percentages. So, anything between 3,000 and 2,960 points is an A. And then 2,000 or 2,820 to 2,700 is an A minus. And you can sort of see the breakdown, the differences between A minus, and B's, and all that. Okay. Now, just for me, both professionally and personally, I do not like to fail students. However, if a student does give me an argument that they want to fail the course, I will be more than happy to oblige them and not lose any sleep over it. So then you might be considering to yourself or thinking to yourself, well, what would be an argument to fail? Don't do this. Don't submit any of the work. Don't contact me if something is happening to you that's drawing your attention from the class and I don't see any submission or any work submitted. And I will try to make a concerted effort to reach out to students if I see that there's an issue, either in the writing as well as like just assignment submission, and just find out what's happening. But if I don't hear a response, my default position is that you don't necessarily care, right? And then if you're not going to care, then I'm not necessarily going to over exert myself to be able to find out what's going on, because I do understand how life does get in the way of your education, and especially how things are happening economically and politically in this country right now. Things are much more unstable and unpredictable, just because of the uncertainty that has been introduced into the larger system and social structures. All right. So you need to make sure that you're able to communicate with not only with myself but other professors, just in case if something happens. Okay. Now, in the case a situation does happen that does draw your attention away from the course, talk to me. We could set up a Zoom meeting, and then we could figure out a strategy on how to try to get you through the course. And I've helped students in the writing course and other courses that I've taught at Dominguez Hills, and as well as other places that I teach and taught, to make sure that you finish the course and don't take the course over again, like at some point in the future. Okay. So I'll get off my soapbox and go back to reviewing the course syllabus. All right. Oh, so here it is where I wrote about attendance is defined for this online course as signing onto Canvas and remaining logged in for 30 minutes. Participation is defined as not only logging onto Canvas show, but also carrying out the assigned tasks, and I'll fix that, associated with the week's readings. This means that you earn credit for participation and you must complete many assignments, sorry about that are associated with the weekly readings and so on and so forth. All right. And I'm not going to do the module assignments to the point where you don't finish it. All right. You'll be able to finish it. All right. And again, if you have any questions on the assignments, please email me. But as I mentioned in the first email, sorry, not the first email, in the first video, I will do a YouTube video explaining what I want you to do and what to focus on that particular assignment. Okay. All right. So that's for attendance. Writing emails. Because I teach at two different campuses, I just want to make sure you understand and practice email etiquette. Because I can tell you, when I see an email that says, "Hey, you," or "What's up," or any other salutations, that is not an appropriate salutation to give your professor because we are not familiars, meaning that we're not friends. We have a professional relationship as the professor for this class, so there has to be a certain type of reciprocity in terms of respect. You respect me as a professor and I respect you as a student. All right. So then when you're writing an email, you start off with your email saying, "Hey, you," or "What's up." And I've had conversations here and there over the years about with other professors and how they sort of get irritated when they get those similar type of emails from their students. So you want to make sure that you're courteous and you use professional language because this is also part of your socialization as sociologists as well as academics. All right. Even though that you may not necessarily consider yourself as such, I consider you that you're learning to become academics. All right. And academic professionals, even though that you may not necessarily stay in sociology as your field, but then take those skills and then apply them in whatever job or career that you decide for yourself. Okay. So you always use courteous and professional language. And then when you just write an email, in the subject area, please put the course name, the course number, like Soc 309 42, and the section number, because I organize my emails like that, so it's much easier for me to find all the emails that I need to find for students. All right. And then write the issue that needs to be addressed. You do not need to tell me which class you're in enrolled. It is clearly stated in the subject bar. So writing your emails like this allows me to keep them organized by class and sections. Oh, excuse me. Okay. All right. And then written assignments. So you're going to have the written assignments. You can write it on a word processor, but you could also write it on the Canvas shell on the text window. However, I strongly recommend that you do not write your essays only in the Canvas shell or the editor. In the editor in the Canvas shell, if you just want to submit it on the Canvas shell, first write your essay in a word processor, Google Docs or Word document or Pages if you use a Mac. And then when you're ready to submit, just highlight, copy, and then paste it. All right. And then you have your own record of the document on your device, as well as you submitting it onto the Canvas shell. All right, because sometimes what happens if you're writing on the text editor in the Canvas shell and you refresh or you forget to save and then you lose everything. I've had students lose like hours of work because they didn't save. So it's just easier for you as a student to be able to write your essays in a word processor and then copy and transfer. All right. Okay, and then but when you do write, you want to make sure that you follow the standard essay format. 1 inch margins, 12-point font, double space. Oh, and I forgot to add, make sure that it's Times New Roman, right? When you write, because Times New Roman is much easier to read than the other fonts. Okay. And then I also encourage you, and I'm going to stress this throughout the semester, that you visit Purdue Owl, and you could just highlight and copy, and then put it in the search engine, and this will take you to their. Then you'll find and I think it's the first link, Purdue Owl, and it's a writing online writing lab that's provided by Purdue University. And I've been suggesting to students for the past 10 years or so to go to Purdue Owl to use it as a writing reference, because when you're writing, you should always have a writer's manual, a thesaurus, as well as a dictionary. All right, and I still have it even when I write. I have a thesaurus, dictionary, and a writing manual. Right, because you want to be able to have like variability in terms of sentence structure and how you construct paragraphs, but then also you want to have a very broad use of words, but you also don't want to sound overly technical where the words sort of overpower the ideas that you're trying to convey to your reader. So it is a very fine balance, and it's almost like an art form where you're able to take your ideas, the words, and put them in a specific manner to where you're able to effectively communicate your ideas in writing. All right. And this is also something that we're going to sort of talk about, or I'm going to discuss with you, is that when you speak in relationship to writing, they are not the same thing. Because when you speak, you tend to use more words than is really necessary. But because we're speaking and we don't hear or tend to pay attention to all the words, it doesn't necessarily distract from what is being conveyed to us when we speak to each and one another. However, if you write the way you speak, it's not going to make sense, because when you write, then you get to see all the other unnecessary words that you use when you're writing, all right, versus when you're speaking. So that's the sort of thing that I'm going to draw your attention to as we go through the semester. Okay. All right. So like that's for the written assignments. And then the next thing are the Canvas weekly Canvas modules. As I mentioned, I will post them like by Tuesday evening. And then you'll have the week to work on it and then submit it to me on the Sunday. All right. The peer editing essay is what you're going to do, and I'll show you when I review the reading list when and where you're going to submit your essay for the editing exercise. So an exercise every student will have to participate in is to edit a peer's previously written essay, and the essay could be from any course that you've taken at Dominguez Hills. Now, if you're a transfer student that just transferred from a junior college, you can use a paper that you wrote at the junior college. All right. The only requirement that I really need is that the paper has to be at least a minimum of 5 pages long. All right, because that is enough information for your peer to be able to read your essay and make certain determinations on what you're saying, but also how you're able to present your ideas. All right. And again, I will provide the handout or the prompt as well as a YouTube tutorial going over that assignment. All right. And the same thing with the writing a reflection on peer editing essay. So then the things that you did from this first assignment, you're going to talk about them in this assignment. All right. So you don't really need to do any extra work other to take notes and pay attention to what you're doing with the initial editing of your peer's essay. Right. And then that in this essay, the reflection is just you sort of taking stock in inventory of the things you've done and what you've learned by doing this type of exercise. Right. So like that's the reflection paper. And then you have the research proposal, and this project intends to have you think through some issues associated with conceptualizing research projects. You will consider things like ethical and methodological issues sociologists must address when doing research, the theory used to frame your topic, developing questions, and so on. You will decide if your research will be quantitatively or qualitatively grounded. By the middle of the semester, we will discuss the creation of how you will go about completing the assignment, and individually and collectively, whichever method you decide on, the instructor of record will consult with students about the progress or the lack thereof moving forward to the completion. So basically, it's just saying that I'm going to mentor you or guide you on putting this research proposal together. And making sure that it is clear as possible, but also to try to make as little writing errors as possible. Okay. So that's for the research proposals. And then the readings, it is expected that you are to do the readings for the course, because if you don't do the readings for the course or for the modules, then you will not necessarily be able to answer the questions or do the assignments for that particular module. Right. Yeah. So then so that's pretty much the general or the gist of it. If you have like a learning disability or some challenges in terms of how to process information, you can go to DSPS, I think that what's called here, and be able to get supportive services, right? So make sure, even if you don't need to use like DSPS, um, find the writing lab and all the and or sorry, and all the other resources that you need to be able to succeed and thrive at Dominguez Hills. All right, because again, my goal or my expectation for students is that you're going to apply to graduate school at the very minimum, at least with the masters, and then if you feel up to it and ambitious and overzealous, a PhD, right? But all of that, or even if you go to a different major to get your advanced degree, you're going to be writing, right? So you really need to focus and take writing seriously. Because as I mentioned in the previous video, unfortunately, in this industry, the type of intellectual or person that you are is determined based on how you write. And again, I understand it is unfair, but that's how this field has sort of developed over the years. All right. So I hope this makes sense. All right. And then, yeah, I won't necessarily go through this other stuff that you could read. And this is just stuff that I copied down from the student catalog. All right. About plagiarism, collusion, and all that other stuff. All right. So then I'm going to stop the video here and go over this part. All right. So let me stop and I'll be back.